It's been brought to my attention that many of the comments, videos, and overall tenor and tone of this program have been considered hurtful and offensive to many, and while not in violation of policy guidelines, certainly skirted the line of human decency. I, along with everyone here at StevenCrowder, am not above recognizing my mistakes and attempting to rectify them. So I'd like to take this opportunity to formally apologize to all parties involved. Firstly, my heartfelt apologies to practicing socialists offended by the Che Guevara "Socialism is for Figs" t-shirt. I know that we should fight bad ideas with good ideas and respectfully debate the merits, virtues, and shortcomings of socialism, as opposed to merely mocking it with a hysterical t-shirt available at louderwithcrowdershop.com. Also, my apologies to the Nabisco Corporation and their Fig Newton subsidiary. I would also like to apologize to Drake, the rapper, for referring to him as a, quote, buttersoft bitch, and claiming that his only redeeming quality as a performer was when he was shot into permanent paralysis on Degrassi. I'd also like to apologize to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg for implying that she's long been deceased. And even though I don't have verifiable proof to the contrary, I do realize my observations were conducted in poor taste and ill-timed. I also apologize for Pantelis's remarks implying that she looks like a cartoon snail librarian. To UFC heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier, I'm sorry for describing your fighting style as that of a, quote, hairless baby filled with hate. Daniel Cormier, I'm sorry. I'd also like to retract my comment about Representative Dan Crenshaw, implying that his mugshot would, quote, resemble that of an angry pirate shift manager in a Brooks Brothers catalog store, and that it would be, quote, the stuff of children's nightmares. To my dear friend and esteemed colleague Ben Shapiro, I sincerely apologize for implying that you're a greedy shekel hoarder. Words matter. And while I swear I meant greedy in a good way, I see now how it might have been misconstrued. Ben Shapiro, I'm sorry. While discussing my good friend and esteemed colleague Ben, I'd also like to apologize for implying that his tumblers spread cancer. Even though there's a distinct possibility that they do spread cancer, the science has yet to be conclusively settled. And until it is, I should be more respectful of the number 2 drinking vessel in conservatism. I apologize. Also, an apology to the Jewish community at large for wrongly pointing out that while they've achieved great success in the realm of medicine, finance, and technology, God's chosen people have yet to present a viable athlete with a vertical jumping capability greater than that of a 4th grade child. Jews, we're sorry. Also, I apologize to the Palestinian people for stating that they were a, quote, backwards people from an imaginary country that never really existed because none of the Muslims wanted you. Palestine, I'm sorry. I apologize to General Motors for stating that their cars were unreliable rattle boxes and that I, quote, wouldn't drive a Chevy Volt if I needed to get to the emergency room and my dick was on fire. GM, I'm sorry. Apologies to the Sicilian community for, in poor taste, stating that while they were technically Italian, if they examined their family tree closely enough, there was a strong likelihood that they'd, quote, find a black man hiding behind their woodshed somewhere. I'd like to issue an apology to Tess Holliday for incorrectly implying that her blood type was biologically comparable to that of pudding. She is both brave and beautiful, and I should have done more to celebrate that. Also, an apology to the Jell-O Pudding Corporation for associating their product with Tess Holliday. Finally, apologies to aquatic mammals for comparing them to Tess Holliday as well. Speaking of our aquatic mammalian community, I would like to apologize to Amy Schumer, whom I've implied to be grossly overweight, dangerously promiscuous, and reprehensibly unfunny. We should remember her when she was at her best, at a point where she was funny. I'd like to formally apologize to Vice President Joe Biden for stating that he is, quote, the kind of guy who would have his bachelor party hosted at a Chuck E. Cheese. I would also like to apologize for a poorly timed and distasteful Biden grab-ass SpongeBob cartoon parody. Also, apologies to Nick at Night. To my half-Asian lawyer, Bill Richmond, I would like to apologize for the insinuation that his billable hours exceed those actually worked, as well as accusing him of covering Hopper and Dry Rub in preparation for a Mongolian fusion barbecue. Half-Asian Bill, I'm sorry. I'd like to ask for forgiveness from the Hodge twins for comparing them to, quote, the crisscross guys all grown up on Anavar. My deepest apologies to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for comparing him to a glistening vagina. Even when we disagree, we should be more mindful of our world leaders and the great burden they carry on their lips. Also, I apologize to vaginas everywhere for comparing them wrongfully to Justin Trudeau. Vaginas serve a viable, useful, and pleasant purpose, And seeing as I do not have one, I now understand that I am not entitled to an opinion on their goings-on. Finally, I would like to apologize to the city of Quebec for this mustache. I'm sorry to Dave Rubin for insensitively pointing out that he is, quote, the most boring domesticated gay man since Rock Hudson played doctor with Gomer Pyle. And to my employee, colleague, and my dear friend Brodigan, I apologize for insinuating that even though I would love him just the same, his uncomfortable enthusiasm for both Taylor Swift and the Pitch Perfect franchise led me to believe that he was a blatant practicing homosexual, or at the very least, a little bi. Brodigan, I'm sorry. I'd like to formally apologize to the Bob Ross estate for tarnishing his legacy with portrayal of Muhammad's likeness, subsequently painting it in period blood, and finally painting his legal team as eating from a corn-infested pile of fecal matter alongside the holiest of prophets, Muhammad, peace be upon him. I apologize to the drag queen Storytime for trampling on what was solely intended to be an educational and family-friendly experience at the Houston Public Library with sex offenders. I'd like to take a moment to apologize to Planned Parenthood for equating their sales tactics with that of a used car salesman with our installments Crazy Pete's Abortion Barn, both 1 and 2, along with Crazy Pete's Embryonic Stem Cell Emporium. I'd also like to apologize to used car salesmen everywhere who work hard and form the backbone of this society's working class. They did nothing to invite this unwarranted comparison. Also, a second apology to Planned Parenthood is in order for deceiving them into the false notion that StevenCrowder was indeed a real pregnant trans woman. I would also like to apologize to the woman whose pregnant urine was used in said video, illicitly obtained on a Craigslist advertisement, and not being forthright with the urine's intended purpose. Speaking of Stephanie, I'd like to formally apologize to State Senator Wendy Davis for deceiving her into believing that Stephanie was an actual transgender woman attending the Austin Women's March. Miss Davis had a promising political career before being interviewed by Stephanie, and I regret the subsequent derailing as a result of such a convincing portrayal. I'd also like to take this chance to make amends with Planet Fitness. I'm sorry that you too were convinced by my dishonest portrayal and for setting off your lunk alarm no less than 18 times. I'd like to apologize to Lena Dunham for the constant comparisons to her physical appearance and that of Shamu. I have since retroactively directed all of my staff to remove all pictures of Lena Dunham in their entirety from our archives. To Bruce Lee and his fans, I would like to apologize for insinuating that Bruce Lee was an overrated 135-pound weakling bereft of any fighting ability with no actual combat record whatsoever. Bruce and fans, I apologize. My regrets and apologies are expressed to Quarter Black Garrett for needlessly insisting that his racial ambiguity act as a focal point in this programming. Quarter Black Garrett works tirelessly both behind and in front of the cameras, and his lifelong inability to find acceptance among the black or white communities of America is far more painful than any mockery I could serve him as punishment. I understand that now. I'm sorry. My apologies to the Motor City madman, Ted Nugent, for my statement that his skin resembles and smells like that of bison jerky. It was originally intended as a compliment, I'd like to clarify, but I now understand why he might have taken offense. I'd also like to apologize to our esteemed President Donald Trump for my ill-timed Trump Talk series of videos, one of which I, as President Trump, implied that Megyn Kelly was a whore. I now understand that I was far out of line and will leave said methods of attack to our president in the future. I'm sorry, both Megyn and President Trump. Also, apologies to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for implying that she couldn't stand on her own 2 feet, that she coughed up a lung on more than one occasion, for stating that she covered up her husband's alleged rapes, and for circulating both mean-spirited and unconfirmed rumors that she was both Huma's lover and a practicing witch. I'd like to issue a formal apology to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford for not giving her earned title the respect that it deserves, instead simply calling her Christy. And I apologize for insinuating that the investigative parties had left her case open to the distinct possibility of her being a, quote, lying whore. Dr. Christie, I'm sorry. I'd also like to issue an apology to the fine people of Great Britain for perpetuating the hurtful stereotype that the British people are incapable of basic dental hygiene. My deepest apologies to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for the callous AOC Deep Thoughts sketch, which equates AOC with a bug-eyed cartoon too stupid to form cogent thoughts, and may perhaps suffer from a form of early onset dementia, which I now know is no laughing matter ever. I apologize. To Marvel Comics I would like to apologize for my statement that your catalog of crappy films was surpassed only by your casting of social justice warrior pussies, for calling your standout star Infinity Twink. And to DC Comics, I'd like to apologize for saying that you wish you were Marvel. I'd like to issue an apology to Bernie Sanders for not only mocking his socialist and authoritarian viewpoints without mercy, but also for my inaccurate portrayals of him, including, but not limited to, Gilbert Godfrey Bernie, Dr. Jekyll Bernie, Russian commie Bernie, professional stripper Bernie, and all other Bernie incarnations therein. I'd like to apologize to the always stunning and brave Caitlyn Jenner for misgendering her and implying that she is not a real woman. Also for insinuating that her downstairs resembles that of a crab rangoon. Also, I sincerely apologize for mocking the Women's March as, quote, just another excuse for HR to take a day off work. My deepest regrets to the Yorkshire Terriers and the Yorkie enthusiast community for implying that they are not real dogs and, quote, make good soup. Also, I apologize again to the Asian community for insisting that many of them eat dogs. I should be more mindful and tolerant of others' culture and culinary customs. I'm sorry to Brett Baer for insinuating that his hairline was so low that I couldn't, quote, tell where his eyebrows ended and forehead begins. I apologize to noted hip-hop star MC Bulletproof for, within 24 hours of his untimely death, stating in jest that, quote, apparently God sided with his notorious rival MC armor-piercing bullets. I now see that it was both ill-timed and performed in poor taste. I'm sorry to my good friend Andrew Clavin for my statements regarding my requirement in wearing, quote, solar eclipse glasses just to look in the general direction of his gleaming bald skull, and subsequently following it up with the implication that, quote, he would make a great Captain America villain. In 2014, a joke appeared in this program, which was written as follows. If an angry feminist is raped in a forest with no one near to hear, is she still heinously unattractive? I'd like to apologize for that joke to the victims of sexual assault, as well as the Japanese people and vibrant culture of the haiku community for both our appropriation and our insensitivity. I'd also like to apologize to BuzzFeed for saying that they were staffed by, quote, failed English majors with multiple Pokemon tattoos that belong to a secret buzz-cutted lesbian motorcycle chain gang. BuzzFeed, I'm sorry. I'd also like to say that I'm sorry to Brian Stelter for implying that he resembled Barney from The Simpsons if he were on an episode of Queer Eye. Also for our writer Pantelis' observation that, quote, for a talking penis, he lacks charisma. Apologies to John Kasich for describing him as an annoying wiener and the kind of guy who would show up uninvited to a party with a warm case of Zima, as well as implying that his hair, quote, resembled that of a newly birthed baby bird in a BP oil spill. Sticking with the 2016 primary, an apology to Carly Fiorina for, in our cartoon debate, allowing John Kasich's character to imply that her womb was barren. I need to issue an apology. I now realize this was offensive to the barren womb community and that Miss Fiorina is, of course, not amongst them. Also, to Dr. Ben Carson, I apologize for implying that he, quote, sounded like a Jim Henson character who required the gain be turned up on his lavalier microphone. I also apologize to Senator Rand Paul for comparing his haircut to, quote, those little bristles on a toilet brush in our company green room restroom. Senator Rand Paul, I'm sorry. I humbly apologize to feminist scholar Naomi Wolf for insinuating that I apologize to feminist scholar Naomi Wolf. She deserves a right apology. For insinuating that a true strong feminist would, when appearing on a national broadcast, quote, at least have the foresight to charge her phone. Apologies to the uncircumcised community at large for implying that their members look like a, quote, Chinese finger trap, or one of those, quote, toy silicone bags you would buy at the local Dollar Tree which constantly slips out of your hands. To Johnny Mathis, I apologize for stating that while he is immensely talented, that due to his setting of high school record track meets, he was, quote, the worst kind of queer because you could never outrun him. I apologize to Don Lemon as well for implying that he looks like a dead Johnny Mathis and is aging faster than a podling from the Dark Crystal. I apologize to the Young Turks for the following. Anna Kasparian for showing both a before and after picture of your rhinoplasty surgery and for calling you a race traitor for sitting alongside an Armenian genocide denier all these years. To the homosexual buzz-cutted gentleman, I apologize for never having learned your proper name. I would also like to apologize to Cenk Uygur for crashing his South by Southwest panel as Cenk Uyghur. To the immigrant community, I would like to apologize for the implication that illegally entering this country is a recognized crime, by definition, making one a criminal. I would also like to apologize to the Latin Kings, MS-13, as well as the Bloods and the Crips for insisting that they were violent gangs and closeted homosexuals, when in fact they have served as protectors and pillars of their community for decades past and hopefully yet to come. I'd like to issue an apology to Tom Jones for stating that on his early television program, his pants were so tight that it, quote, looked like he was attempting to smuggle a deformed hallucinogenic mushroom. I apologize to the Hells Angels for claiming that I, quote, couldn't pick them out from a lineup full of Folsom Street f***s. To Jussie Smollett for our segment of What a Piece of Shit, Jussie Smollett edition, which now is hovering over 1.9 million views. I hope it never hits 2 million. The link is in the description. Mr. Smollett, I'm sorry. I apologize to Nathan Phillips for implying that he looked like a toothless meth head and denigrating the rich Native American tradition of self-discovery by referring to it as a, quote, methamphetamine quest. I also apologize to the good people of Harley-Davidson for referring to their bikes as, quote, overpriced penis compensation devices that spend more time in the garage than they ever do between the legs of the closeted share fan who was stupid enough to purchase it. Harley purchasers and riders, I'm sorry. I would also like to apologize to Bill O'Reilly for including him in no less than 21 photoshops, which either directly affirmed or indirectly insinuated the now known to be completely baseless allegations of his sexual misconduct. And to Eric Bolling, I apologize for including him in no less than 14 of said photoshops, insinuating him as an accomplice. When asked to remove these photoshops, I'd like to apologize for hastily and lazily pasting over the clear Eric Bolling photograph with Kevin Spacey's face, while subsequently including his image as hidden Easter eggs for photoshops in the months to come. I apologize to the people of Detroit for denigrating the city's policies, architecture, infrastructure, citizens, and culture with relentless regularity and vigor. Not only going so far as to shoot multiple videos there, but even going so far as to campaign for them to be annexed to Canada and relieve America of the greatest metropolitan stain in our nation's history. I would also like to apologize to the country of Canada for subsequently and actively lobbying that we bomb them. War is never something of which we should make light. Also, apologies to the Canadian military for implying that their Air Force consisted of, quote, nothing more than a single propeller plane with a .22 rifle, and belittling the great contributions made to liberating the world of tyranny through their notable peacekeeping service. I apologize to the country of India in its entirety for keeping a proverbial eye on it. Shit in the streets should not be a litmus test of whether your country is to be considered among the developed world. While on the subject, I'd like to apologize to California for the same reason. I apologize to the gay community for pointing out and making jokes regarding the statistics that reflect AIDS as being virtually and entirely a homosexual disease in the modern world, in failing to point out the additional single-digit contribution rate from recycled hypodermic needle users. I did a great disservice to our audience in robbing them of accurate and potentially helpful reporting. I apologize. To YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, I'm sorry for not only wrongly implying her to be a leftist authoritarian, but for unflattering portrayals of her as performed by Quarter Black Garrett, Maximus the PA, and none other than Clint Howard. I'd like to apologize to Paul Joseph Watson for stating that he, quote, looked like the high school bully in an early 90s teen film. Also to Sean Hannity for implying that he looks like Fred Flintstone incarnate and has a head like a refrigerator, and to Matt Eisman for making fun of his favorite band, Creed. I'd like to apologize to Harvey Weinstein for stating that he has an unhealthy attraction to ficus plants, which was a terrible and poorly worded way to speak of Jennifer Lawrence. I'd like to apologize to Glenn Beck for stating that his bit where he stuck his face in the Cheetos was, quote, as funny as testicular cancer. I'd like to apologize to both the burrowing owl and its conservation community therein who have suffered needlessly from my tireless assault on this animal, which has led to both its increased capture and placement on the endangered species list. I should have never referred to the burrowing owl as, quote, an abomination that natural selection would have eliminated if not for useless, patchouli-wearing, Birkenstocked lesbian activists with too much time on their hands. I'd like to apologize to a majority of the world's Islamic fundamentalists for the apt but poorly worded comparison in that they were, quote, pretty much just Nazis who beat their wives. I would like to apologize to both the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, as well as the Organization of Breastfeeding Mothers of Germany, for my unflattering and historically inaccurate portrayal of tranny breastfeeding Adolf Hitler. While it was not my intended goal, I now realize that my portrayal has led only to the increased stigmatization of public breastfeeding, as well as the Nazi Party. Finally, I would like to apologize for the use of all of the following racially, sexually, and generally prejudicially charged pejorative nouns and or adjectives that have been used on this program. Homo, colored, wap, mick, gay, spook, slant, queer, zed, dildo, no, to rear admiral, buzz-cutted lesbian chain gang, starfish, and Mexican. I think that about covers it. Again, I would like to issue my sincerest apologies, and if I've forgotten anybody, please list your grievances in the comments below. I'll be sure to get back to you with great haste. Thank you.